in this way, they are more than a wish-fulfilling jewel, because they help you, they push you. They are the reason why anyone would want to be enlightened in the first place, right? They are the reason, they are the cause, you know. So for this reason, then, it is said that sentient beings are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Now, when we say sentient beings, in the Buddhist like taxonomy, then we of course talk about the 6 realms, right? We talk of the lower realms and the upper realms. And we talk of infinite sentient beings. Infinite. But if you try to generate a sense of compassion or love to those infinite sentient beings, then it might seem somewhat, it might seem like nonsense, you know. Infinite sentient beings develop compassion for sentient beings that is beyond us, you know, that we cannot even, that doesn't even appear to our mind, you know, that we cannot resonate with, right? That we cannot relate with. So first, perhaps then, when we say all beings, then we should begin with the beings that are near us, you know, close to our proximity. I think this is very important, you know. You have to begin, you know, from around, right? You cannot just begin from infinite. It needs to start. It needs to grow. So it needs to grow from yourself, from your surrounding, and then your neighborhood, and then just increase, you know, just increase and try to include more beings. This is very important and also practical. If you talk of, you know, how we say in the recitation, all sentient beings, and then exclude the beings that are near us, exclude the sentient being who shares the house with us, you know, exclude that sentient being, then how can you then include all sentient beings, right? So we need to work with the person that is closest to us. Slowly, you know. It may not be easy, but, you know, slowly and slowly, you have to work. You have to work. You have to work on it, you know. You have to work on it. See, when we have thoughts of, what's the word? Animosity? Right? animosity. Many times we are projecting out images, right? Animosity comes as a result of projecting unpleasant qualities, right? Unpleasant attributes. And we might not be 100% wrong in thinking like that, right? But what the problem is that when we have these feelings, what we are really doing is that we are being very selective. No? The person that we know has a good side and also a not so good side, two sides, just like the two truths. There are two sides, right? Two sides. So when we emphasize just the negative side, that's when this feeling arises, right? So it is very important that to look at someone as a person, right? As person just like ourselves, who wants to be equally happy just like us, right? We both share this common goal. Despite our differences, we both want to be happy and we both want a good life. You think like this. This is very important. If you can see someone as a human being, then why would you hate a human being, right? Why would anyone hate someone for purely being a human being? That doesn't make any sense, right? Anger arises when you sort of project a negative quality or project an attribute that you don't want for yourself, right? That you want to be far away from. So that way, then it's good at separating yourself from the other. So if you rely on choosing attributes that differentiates you from the other, then it doesn't help in bringing a sense of closeness. It doesn't. So there is no denying the fact that we share so many common qualities, and that is a fact. No one can deny that. Now, we just need to emphasize more of those shared qualities when we feel feelings of anger or feelings of like maybe some distant feeling, when we cannot relate with someone, then it is important that we try to emphasize more of our shared qualities, our shared goodnesses. Shared goodness. And with this, then, you will be able to practice holding them dear, right? So that is very important. And then now we will go with the second verse. Whenever I am with others, I will practice seeing myself the lowest of all, and from the very depth of my heart, I will recognize others as supreme. Seeing myself the lowest of all, and here I have the highest throne. There seems to be a contradiction. Maybe I should write, I will practice seeing myself the highest of all. Here, Geshe Langri Tangpa, I don't think he's trying. He's not encouraging us to have a low self-esteem, He's not, I don't think he was trying to do that. Lowest of all, many times I think when we count, we would count probably from ourselves, right? It may be easier, like 1, 2, 3, like that, right? And when we say 1, we count ourselves, right? And then the next people, we can count them as 2, 3, 4, 5, like that, right? The number goes up like that. This sentence does not encourage a sense of low self-esteem, but what it does encourage is to lower our high, or maybe our self-cherishing mind, It's trying to lower that. It's trying to lower the intensity of how we cherish ourselves. This is, I think, the meaning, right? Lowest of all is figurative speaking, and it's really about lowering our self-cherishing thought, trying to bring that process down, because right now, if you don't think about it, naturally, when we think throughout the day, we are usually thinking about us, right? We are always thinking about that. We are. So, to bring down the level of self-cherishing and then recognizing others as supreme means that we will hold them and give them more value. Yeah? Because right now, with our self-cherishing approach, we don't really take their concern, We don't think about their concern. We don't value them that much. So supreme means to give them more value, and there is a certain element of self-sacrifice here, right? Because to truly be altruistic, then you will come to a point when you will have to sacrifice your happiness for the other's happiness. Yeah? this is, when I say that, I don't mean like sacrificing one's life for, to save another life. Not that extreme, but many times even just a few moments of our pleasure or relaxation, whatever, are we willing to sacrifice that so that we can help someone in need, If we think like this, then maybe this is what this verse is trying to tell us, that if you have some moments that you can help some others, by which you're, of course, sacrificing your time or your free time, this is how we practice this verse. Again, little by little, we need to start practicing like this right away, but in a way that we can manage it, and in a way that we feel good about it, and that we want to continue doing this, right? So this is very important. I think after committing a virtuous actions, after helping someone, we as human beings, we have emotions, right? There is a sense of satisfaction. We cannot deny ourselves that satisfaction. We cannot stop that. We have to differentiate that from arrogance, It's important that we get some joy. Of course, we should not expect something in return, but this joy should be there. If you follow the procedure correctly, this joy is automatic, right? It will come. You don't need to work on that. You just have to work on making the other person happy, and you will get joy. So, from this verse, then lowering ourselves, lowering our concern, and then maximizing the other's concern, other's happiness. But when you use these words, even though you might ask questions, right? Even though this may seem like one of those words that should not be taken literally, still, when you use these words, I think they have a certain power, right? They have a certain weight. If you apply this verse in the right way, then you can start to appreciate the meaning of this verse, even though it may seem poetic, poetic, yeah. So, okay, we'll take some moments off now, and maybe we take some moments off and just reflect on the meaning of these two verses. So maybe I will just repeat these two verses. With the thought of attaining enlightenment for the welfare of all beings who are more precious than wish-fulfilling jewels, I will constantly practice holding them dear. Whenever I am with others, I will practice seeing myself the lowest of all, and from the very depth of my heart, I will recognize others as supreme. Okay. Oh, it was, I think, what happened in Las Vegas, that's terrible, right? Very, very sad. I sometimes wish that there were no guns in this country, I do. But it seems that that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, that saying, guns don't kill people, right? That saying. But guns sure make it easy to kill people, right? And that's just, if I had a wish fulfilling jewel, that would be that would be on top of my list. Make all the guns disappear from this planet. Yeah. But again, when something bad happens closer to our proximity, then it seems it's stronger, right? But right now, something similar is happening all over, right? Now, I mean, in the Middle East, in Africa, this is constantly happening. We feel so disconnected from all of those, don't we, right? But when it happens a few hundred miles, a few miles, or in the neighborhood, then that's like a wake-up call, right? Then you feel like, that could have been me. I could have been there, right? So this, the reason why when something bad happens to people nearby, it shakes us more. We feel more compassion. We feel stronger emotions. Is that, as I was saying before, we see more of the shared qualities with those people, whereas the people further away, we don't see that same quality in them, On the contrary, we might see more of the differentiating factors, the differentiating attributes of those people. So if we can see both those groups, as human beings, then there's no way that we can differentiate, right? So basically, there are people all over this planet that are suffering, And if we can concentrate on that oneness, right, of human beings, then I think this helps in developing compassion, developing love for our fellow sentient beings. But then it's very important that, what happens after generating love and compassion, Then what? What's the next step? What can we do for them, right? Then I think even though meditating is good, meditating on the two paths is good, but we need to do something that helps them, directly. We also need to take a practical path. We need to be in contact with them, We need to offer something, that will bring them some hope. This is very important. Simply sitting in our room and sending good wishes does not benefit them because we have no connection, right? So it's important that we have to make a link, make a connection with the people that we want to generate compassion on, that we want to help, that we are trying to hold more precious than wish-fulfilling jewels. This is very important. So, whenever like a disaster, something happens, something bad, something a tragedy that strikes and that destroys a family, that destroys a neighborhood, that destroys a town, a city, half of the country, something like that. That's when I think we need to take action, right? Even we could send out something, It need not be of a huge value or a huge amount, but we have to do something, because if each of us makes a small contribution, that will complete, that will complete everything, that will complete happiness, that will complete our practice, As a Buddhist, then I can say this will complete our practice. But as a human being, then I think this will complete our being, that this will complete our potential, because we have, not only do we have this intelligence that non-human beings lack, but we also have this sense of empathy, right? We can feel for other people. Again, that has to do with intelligence, obviously, but we still have this sense of empathy. And if we do not, look towards those people, and if we just block ourselves, then we can never ever develop this sense of loving kindness towards them. We can never do that. So it's very important that nowadays, through technology, we see the world, right? We see what's happening around the world, and it's important that we take that opportunity to develop some compassion, to develop empathy, to develop a sense of oneness. And if we practice like this, then I think we would then be practicing, these two verses that we just covered. So please keep that in mind. So if now maybe we have some questions, if you would like to add something, question, anything, please feel free to do so.
Hi, thank you, Rinpoche, for being here and all your wonderful teachings. And I feel like a lot of the violence and those problems stem from fear. And I've met people that own guns, and they really like them. And I always ask them why they have this fascination. And a lot of times it's because they are afraid of strangers invading their house, or strangers or whatever showing up and being a threat to them. And even as a country, I feel like there is an overall sense of fear everywhere, about enemies everywhere. So I know that Buddha is fearless, and I want to know if you can talk a little bit about that fearlessness.
Fear comes from, obviously, self-cherishing thought, right? But I know that fear is not something that only, Americans have. Indians also have fear, but Indians don't have guns, right? So right now, I think, like what happened in just last night, obviously, guns, I think, played a huge role. But I think that, I don't know how things work in, at the government level, but it's like as long as you have this tool that makes it so easy to take a life, as long as you have that in circulation, of course people will have fear and then buy guns to protect from guns, right? So right now when I look at this problem, I just wish that there were no guns. And then people, okay, without guns, people can still have fear, right? But still, if they got really angry, they wanted to take some lives, then they might have to, resort to using the kitchen knife or something, and that makes it obviously more difficult. Yeah, but with that other tool, it just in an instant, in just a few minutes, lives are taken. It just makes it so easy. This is about that situation, but generally, because we have self-cherishing thoughts, fear naturally arises, and fear by itself, like I said yesterday, is not a bad thing. It is only when you give people these tools of, like, I could call that tools of mass distraction, mass destruction. Then the whole system is not good. But you mentioned Buddha's fearlessness, right? If you have no concern for your needs, for yourself, and if you're fully absorbed for concern for others, then you will have no fear, right? You will have no fear, period. I think if there was a bodhisattva, at that place, and then the bodhisattva would not have any fear and will try to stop the tragedy, even if it meant that the person would shoot him or her. Because if you are willing, to sacrifice your concern for others, then what is there to fear, right? So Buddha's fearlessness, it comes from having generated bodhicitta. It comes from having generated love and compassion for all beings, right? For all beings. With no discrimination, because what is there to discriminate, right? They are all sentient beings. They are all equal in the way that they wish for happiness and want to be free from suffering. And since all sentient beings are equal that way, and if that is the reason for having compassion, then there's no reason why you would have compassion for one and not for the other. So this is why the reason is very important, Not only like for our logic class or something like that, but in our daily life, we always use logic, right? We always use reasoning. We use them without really realizing that we have used them. So it is important to realize how we operate, how we choose human beings, sentient beings, how we discriminate, how we are selective. And by understanding that, then to look the other way, then to concentrate on our common attributes, on our common features, on our oneness, that is important. And to spread the message of love and compassion and tolerance, and these universal values. It's important that we get that message across the whole spectrum to make sure that no one is left behind, that we need to give this message to everyone, the message of love and compassion is universal. And if people can learn that, from a young age, then obviously that would make things a lot easier. But so many people haven't received that opportunity, So what is important is that we now educate the parents so that when they raise their children will be raised in love and compassion, right? Love and compassion for fellow human beings. I think this is very important. Because if you look, most of human conflict arises with feelings of animosity, right? So this is, I think, very important. And when we practice Dharma, this is, I think, really the essence of our practice, We don't need to call it Dharma. We don't need to call it Buddhism, I think so many of the isms, they have caused schisms everywhere. Schisms or schisms, yeah. So we just need to, because that's what Dharma is about. It's about enhancing that quality that we all share, It's about maximizing our potential that we all have. That's where we begin, right? That's where all the realizations begin. That's where all the realizations come from. It comes from these simple emotions that we all share. These are so important. And if people are not just sort of given lectures on love and compassion, but rather shown love and compassion, then I think people will change. That's important. To show love and compassion, I think it's very important. And no matter what happens, it's important that we don't lose our composure, right? We don't lose our composure, that we don't lose our balance. We must always be aware. We must always be mindful. This is important, right? Mindful of our surroundings, mindful of our afflictive emotions, because it's so easy for them to arise. You see something and the next moment, desire. You see something, you hear something, the next moment, anger. So Buddha's teachings of mindfulness, I think, is the need of the hour, especially in such a world filled with distractions. Mindfulness is the only way to overcome that. There is no other method but to rely on mindfulness. So these things are very important, and we should practice this before we can show them to others, right? So, yeah. Okay.
Hi, Rinpoche.
Hi.
How would you recommend you deal with somebody who's like lying to you to try to get your help? Like money or something like that. You know?
Then I think we have to, what's the word these days? Fact checking? Right? Fact checking. We have to do that, right? We have to do that. I think that's important. In other words, we should not be naive. Someone comes up, gives you a nice story, an emotional story, and you become a little emotional. And when you're emotional, then it seems that your heart overtakes, and then your brain sort of then snoozes, right? So again, you have to be mindful, right? And then be mindful of what's happening in your system, right? So we have to be careful. But in India, I saw this, that beggars, lots of beggars in India. And recently, it was on the news that some beggar actually turned out to be a millionaire, by begging. They were actual millionaires, but they pretend to be beggars, right? And it was on the news, like it was like breaking news. In India, all news is breaking news. So sometimes I saw people saying, don't give them money. Did you see that news story on TV? No? They use that as a reasoning to not give money to people. That I don't think is the right thing to do. We have to look at this person, If the person, you can tell, you can get a pretty good idea when a real beggar comes, When a real beggar comes, I think you can tell. You can tell the real ones from those who purport to be a beggar. When it comes to other things, like, as you said, who are lying to get money, then again we have to, we have to sort of get to know them, check their background, background checks, right? Background checks. That's important, huh? That's important. But then, for giving money, of course, it's not necessary that we have to wait for someone who comes to us for money. No, with what happened in Mexico, in Puerto Rico, what's happening, especially when it comes to natural disasters. No one's lying there, right? For those, we can send some little donations, to authentic organizations that help the needy. So we can do small things like this. I think we just need to do that, right? Just play any small role part, any small part that we can play in alleviating some suffering. Then I think there's only goodness in that action, and there's no question about creating good merit with that action. So that's very good. But anyway, with your question, I think this is still very important that when people ask for money, we have to be careful. We have to be careful, and we have to be sure how it is being used. Yeah, this is important, because sometimes on the street you see, I don't know if you have it here, but in Frankfurt there are people asking for money by the U-Bahn, by the subway, and they have 3 papers and some words are written. So on one it says marijuana, on the other it says cocaine. So you give money maybe for cocaine or for marijuana for them. So they spell it out for you, their intention, what they're going to use the money for. So again, it's important that before you give some money, to help, we have to know what they're going to use that for, right? The purpose. So that I think is important. Yeah. Oh, so maybe.
In reference to you were talking about throughout the world, there's all these guns, and of course the history of, in my opinion, guns developed from a history of weaponry from long ago. And additionally, I wanted to know what your opinion is through the contradiction of reincarnation, meaning people seem to be reborn at different levels throughout the world. And at the same time, we can only do what we can do in terms of helping people. What would be your view on this, on the reincarnation of, that there are people at different levels of consciousness? Like the guy that's head of North Korea, for an example, I think he's at a different level than you are. Well, it was an example.
That's yes. We all are unique, right? We all, the 7 billion people, even if they are twins, they are still unique, right? They are still unique. On the guy from North Korea you mentioned, I don't have any comment on him. I don't know about the exact level of his consciousness. I don't know where it is at, but it seems awfully low. But maybe this is part of samsara, Maybe this is what samsara means. That sometimes people just don't get it, Sometimes people just don't get it. Sometimes we don't get it ourselves, right? Sometimes we ourselves, we don't get it. Because the blame, I think, needs to be shared everyone. It's not one side that is fully responsible. It's really us, collectively. We make mistakes. We make a mistake and then someone would reciprocate. They would then get back at us and then we would get back at them and then this starts that circle, right? So it goes back and forth, it goes back and forth. This happens in human conflict. So big countries, they're really like two people, two big countries. They act like us because they're made up of human beings. So obviously, they think like us. And if we look at our conflict with a fellow human being, usually it's not one who is 100% right and one who is not 100% wrong, right? But there is we make mistakes we make mistakes on both sides, right? And same thing, with countries, I think. But in this extreme example, then again, you just cannot think of two countries. It's a group of countries, and there are other countries involved. And if you try to look at the bigger picture, then it's really a group, It's not just two countries, but it's a group of countries. It's like a group of people. It's like two people in conflict, but they have their backers, They have their friends who are sort of pushing the other and like giving bad counsel, Giving bad counsel? Is that the word? Counsel. Sorry. Bad advice, yeah, just giving bad advice, yeah. So, problems. Well, we are beyond our time limit, so should we stop now? Oh, it says 9:30. I'm sorry. Okay. So then I stopped early. Okay. That makes sense. I thought it was still 9, and then I thought, oh, it's 8:30. I should stop and then, let the questions begin. But it seems we have more questions. Well, that's good. Okay. That's nice. All right.
Thank you, Rinpoche. When I hear or read about freedom from suffering, my mind associates freedom of suffering, sorry, I'll write this down, in conventional terms as something that stops existing, in the same manner in which I think associate death. But death itself is not an ending, but a transformation. Is overcoming suffering the same?
Yes, I think overcoming suffering, right? Overcoming suffering, I think, is transmission. I'm sorry, transformation. And I think it is transformation at its very best. When you overcome suffering, that is the best form of transformation, right? But as with your analogy, with death, again, you go through after death, then again there's the rebirth, and then death, and then there's that cyclic existence. Whereas with freedom from suffering per se, then that's end of that story, right? And then maybe you become an arhat, right? We say someone who has overcome suffering, but then you can still transform, right? There's still room for transformation, and that is that you can then become a bodhisattva, and then work, work on cherishing others' concern, right? Even if someone even in our heart, even though in our heart might have overcome his suffering, yet he still hasn't overcome self-cherishing thoughts. So there is again more room for transformation, yes. But of course, you don't need to go through that normal free birth process because because there is no afflictive emotions, right? So yeah.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Question is that we see a lot of times we're blaming people like the guy in North Korea or Trump, but these people are more a product of the collective consciousness. These are only one people, or the same thing with guns. I mean, it's this collective consciousness that has to change. How do we use the discriminative wisdom to change these attitudes?
Maybe we can't change the world, Maybe this is the premise that we exist in. We have to accept that we single-handedly cannot change the world. Even the Buddha, with all his powers, with all his knowledge, with all his loving concern, with of course his speech quality, if he were to come right now to America, imagine if he comes and if he goes to Washington, goes to the White House and meets the president, right? I mean, do you think that he would be able to convince, he would be able to change the president's mind? I don't think so, because if you are that cave that's facing north, then no matter how bright the sun is, you're not going to get that light, right? You're still going to be in the dark. So it's difficult, It's very difficult, but you're right, We just see a person, right? But there is what the person is saying. He is representing people, They say, oh, his ratings came down, like from 50 to 30, but still it's 30. It's not 0, right? So he still appeals to a fair, large amount of people. So, remember that verse from Shantideva? That if the world had something like thorns all over, rather than making them all go away, it's better that you just put on a pair of shoes and then walk, right? So right now I think we are like that we have to wear these shoes, right? We have to put on this body armor, we have to make sure that we don't fall victim to this way of discriminating, to this way of that we don't fall victim to anger, right? Such strong hatred, hatred because someone doesn't hatred for someone because they don't speak your language, right? Because they don't have the same skin color, that kind of thing. It's important that we overcome those things, right? But of course, I know that everyone in this room would have no problem, would have no issues with those types of hatred, but yet we still have hatred, right? We still have anger. We still get angry when those people who have that kind of hatred, when they start to harm people, it's natural that that anger might arise, It's part of our emotions, right? And confronting them with anger is useless. It's pointless, It's like adding fuel to the fire. It's pointless, but rather, as with the two verses, it's important that we get our line of thought, or like we get our mind in tune, with these two verses. This is important, right? As long as you can overcome those destructive emotions, then you have been successful, This is how you change the world. You change yourself first. And if you can change yourself, then you don't need to worry about the world. You can change one person, right? You can change your friend. And slowly we can get this message across. It takes a long process, but you have to start from here, You have to start from here. This is, I think, the only thing that we can do to make this world a better place, is by changing ourselves, is by becoming a better person, right? And playing small parts in society, trying to help someone, trying to give someone maybe a meal, to some starving child in Africa, or helping orphans in the Middle East. There's so many suffering going on, and we just need to do those little parts. And if we can do that, then we don't need to worry about that guy in the White House. We don't need to worry about him. He's going to finish his term one day, and then there will be someone else in his seat. So he's going to pass. He's going to just disappear into the scene one day. And the thing is that when people have really negative thoughts, it's easy for us to differentiate ourselves from that person, right? I don't know, if that is really the right thing. Because if we do it like this way, then our compassion, our love becomes one-sided, right? When we are beginners, maybe that might be difficult. But that might be a difficult approach to take, to include a person who has so much hatred. It might be difficult for us to put us, in the same category as them, you know. And if you're not careful, this feeling, right, of strongly separating ourselves from these kind of people who have such strong hatred, if you're not careful, then we will start to apply the justification of separating ourselves from that group of people to other areas. Yeah? And then we will broaden that criteria. Yeah? The criteria so that the person is distinctly different from us. So with this thing, then we might find ourselves to be very selective, to the point that even if someone doesn't share your beliefs, then you develop a certain, distance, right? So this hinders in developing compassion for all beings. People are talking about having compassion for who they are, right? Not having compassion because they have done some good for us, or they are our relatives, or something like that, but really for who they are. Even the person who has so much hatred for other races or for like that, I think they are the one who should first, they need help, right? They need help. And if you meet someone like that, then it's important that you give them love, because they need it, right? The person who is really sick, who is the most sick, needs medicine, If you have a medicine, then you should give it to the one who really needs it the most. So the person who is filled with so much hatred really needs to be shown love, right? Not hatred, not confrontation, because this is not the right moment. Because if you do that, then that is not skillful, right? That's not skillful. You might have a good motivation, but it's not skillful. I think, like somewhere in the Lojong teachings, they say that if someone beats you up, then don't have anger to the person. Just be grateful that the person didn't kill you, right? So it is there. This method is explained. I know. If nowadays, I think it would be very rare that someone would think like that. Immediately they would think of filing a lawsuit or something like that, right? Let alone, being grateful would be the furthest thing away, right? But it is all in the approach, you see? It is all in your approach and how you relate to the world. That if you have this strong, if you have a strong attachment for your views, if you have a strong attachment for what's right and for what's wrong, if you have a strong attachment to discriminating, not between the races, but discriminating between what's right and what's wrong, then in the end you start to become like the person that you don't want to be. In the end, you then start to become like the person that you wanted to confront, you are taking on some of that attribute then. So we have to be very careful. We have to be very balanced. I think real compassion doesn't have much emotion, right? Real compassion, it's more calm. You don't feel such emotion because you are getting the whole picture, right? You're getting your understanding. Your understanding of suffering is complete. When you feel this sort of feeling, having this strong sense of being very distinct from a person who are full of hatred, when you start to develop this hatred for those kind of people, then you are in a way being intolerant, right? You're being intolerant. I think there's this, I saw somewhere like they say, you have to be tolerant, but you cannot tolerate intolerance, right? You have to be tolerant, but you cannot tolerate intolerance. With this view, I think if you're not careful, then this could have consequences. Because if you really are tolerant, then you should also be able to tolerate intolerant people as well. And not tolerating intolerance is being intolerant, right? So then how are you different from, how are you that different from the person that you don't want to be like, right? So you have to ask these questions, and I think these, when you meditate on compassion, it's maybe a good thing not to be too emotional. Take some time off. If you find yourself become too emotional, then try to be more balanced, right? Try to take a different approach. At first, of course, it's natural, but you need to, at some point, then you need to step back and then sort of get a grip on yourself, right? Get a grip on yourself, and then think out of the box, right? Think out of the box, Don't think within the box, but think out of the box. If you do that, then you become more calm, right? You start to see things clearly. There is clarity, and then that explains everything. And you then start to see the similarity that you share with the person that a few moments you thought you were so different, You start to see the similarity, and that way we can control our mind, control our emotions. Okay. Okay, so I think that's enough for today. Yeah.
Sangye Shinto Mede Yuwa Yu Toge Nanda Shinla